All right, are you ready for this? This one came from our daily bread, and, well, let's just say it's a question that always gets people talking. What is the sex of God? A biblical perspective. This deep dive. Yeah, I think it's going to stretch our thinking a bit.
You're probably right. It really makes you think about, like, all your ideas about God, the whole divine thing.
Exactly. So the big question, does God have a sex?
Yeah.
If so, what's the Bible telling us?
Well, first things first. The Bible's pretty clear that God's a spirit, not like a physical being like us humans. It's right there in John 4.24.
So we're not talking like male or female, right?
Right.
Out the window right away.
Exactly. We got to remember, we can't really apply human ideas of, biological sex to God. It's just not how it works. God's way beyond all that.
Okay, I get that. But hold on. If God's a spirit, why is there so much guy talk in the Bible? Father, King, Lord, and it's always he, him, his.
Yeah, good point. It definitely throws people off. But we got to remember the whole context, When the Bible was written...
You mean like it was a super patriarchal society?
Exactly. Back then, men were the bosses, pretty much. So the language about God, it makes sense that it reflects that.
Like God was speaking in a way they'd get, using what they knew.
Exactly. Making the divine relatable, you could say. But, and this is important, it doesn't mean that God's limited to just those male qualities. It's more like highlighting certain things about God, like strength, power, being in charge.
Okay, I'm starting to see the nuance here. So, not saying God's a dude, literally, but the Bible uses that kind of language to get certain points across.
Right. And this is crucial. It's not only male language for God in the Bible. There are times, surprisingly, where you see feminine imagery pop up.
Really? Wow, didn't know that. Thought it was always the male stuff. Give me an example. What's that look like?
Check out Isaiah 66.13. God's compared to a mother comforting her child. It's a beautiful image, right? Shows God's tenderness, that caring side.
Wow, never noticed that before. Definitely changes how you picture God.
Right. It tells us, hey, God isn't stuck in just one gender box. It's way bigger. Includes those qualities we link to, both men and women.
So, are we saying God's both male and female then?
Not exactly. What we're getting at is that God's totally beyond those human gender categories. Doesn't fit neatly in either one.
Makes sense. Going back to God being spirit, right? So no limitations of our bodies or how we categorize gender.
Precisely. And there's even a hint of this in Genesis 1.27. It says humanity's made in God's image, both male and female.
So hang on, if we're made in God's image and we've got both genders, that means God's nature would have those qualities too, right?
Exactly. That's like one of the most mind-blowing parts of all this. It's saying God's not limited to that traditional either thing we do. God's image, it includes everything we see in both the strength, the tenderness, justice, and mercy, power and compassion, all of it.
Well, that's a lot to take in when you really think about it. Makes you rethink not just how you picture God, but ourselves and each other too.
You're absolutely right. And this realization has some big implications for how we understand our relationship with God and with each other.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What are those implications? How does seeing God as beyond gender actually change things?
Well, first off, it challenges us to think bigger than those simple ideas about God. Embrace the whole picture, not just what's comfortable, We need to see both sides, what's traditionally masculine and feminine, without trying to shove God into either box.
So it's not about picking a team masculine or feminine, but seeing it all, the whole complexity of God.
Precisely. And recognizing that can have a profound impact on how we see our own connection to God.
How so?
Well, think about it. If God's got both strength and tenderness, justice and mercy, then we, as beings made in God's image, can have that too. It breaks down those rigid gender roles we put on ourselves and each other.
I see what you mean. It's like this view of God gives us permission to just be ourselves fully, not limited by what society says men or women should be.
Exactly. It's about embracing how complex and rich our identities are and our connection to the divine.
This is really making me rethink things. Never thought about the masculine and feminine imagery in the Bible like this. It's like a whole new level of understanding.
It's one of those things, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it can really change how you live out your faith.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for someone trying to wrap their head around all this? What does it mean for our lives?
Well, I think the first thing is to admit our human language and understanding. They're never going to fully grasp God. God's beyond us, and that's okay.
So we're not going to find all the answers wrapped up in a neat little package.
No. But that's part of the beauty of faith, right? It's a journey. Exploring, discovering, and that exploration, it should lead us to embrace all the different sides of God. Recognizing our human categories, they just can't contain the divine.
So, approach faith with humility, be open, always willing to learn and grow.
Absolutely. The more we learn, the more we realize there's so much more to learn, and that's okay. It's in that mystery and wonder that our relationship with God can really take off.
I love that. It's not about having all the answers, but being open to the journey
Yeah,
and the possibilities of connecting with God in new ways.
you got it. It's about always trying to understand more deeply, connect with God in a real way. And part of that is letting go of our old ideas and embracing who God is beyond what we can fully understand.
This has been so insightful already. Feels like we've only just scratched the surface. What else are we going to uncover as we go deeper into this?
Well, we've talked about the imagery in the Bible and God being beyond gender. Now, let's look at how this understanding affects our relationship with God and with each other.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's dive in.
You know, all this talk about God being beyond gender, it makes me think about that word father. We use it all the time for God, but what does it really mean when we're talking about a being who's not bound by gender, you know?
That's a good point. I've always pictured it literally, like God's a dad up in heaven. But now, hearing all this, I wonder if I'm missing something deeper.
Yeah, it's something a lot of people struggle with. But think back to that cultural context again. Back when the Bible was written, being a father was a huge deal. It wasn't just biology, it was about providing, protecting, leading.
So maybe father was a way to get across God's role as that loving guide in our lives without getting hung up on the literal biological dad thing.
Exactly. And understanding it that way can actually be really freeing. We can connect with God on a more personal level without those traditional gender roles getting in the way.
I see what you mean. It's focusing on what that relationship's all about, the love, the care, the guidance, not getting stuck on the word father itself.
You got it. And that shift in thinking, it can affect all our relationships, not just with God. It makes us see each other through that same lens. Love, respect, no matter what gender someone is.
So it goes beyond just us and God. It changes how we treat everyone.
Absolutely. It's like seeing that divine spark in each other, recognizing everyone's worth, their dignity, and treating each other with compassion, understanding.
That image, the divine spark in everyone, I love that. It's like looking past the surface stuff and seeing what connects us, our shared humanity.
Exactly. It's about breaking free from those rigid categories and stereotypes we put on each other. We're all on this journey called life, all deserving of love and respect.
It's making me rethink my own relationships. It's not about the labels, but how strong the connection is.
You're getting it. That's where real change happens. When we let go of those preconceived notions and embrace each other fully for who we are, that's where we find deeper connection, more real relationships.
This whole conversation is making me think about unity and diversity. We talked about male and female being created in God's image. Does that apply to, all the ways people express gender and identity?
Now you're getting to the heart of it. If we truly believe we're all made in God's image and that God embodies the fullness of human experience, how can we exclude anyone, marginalize them, just because of how they express their gender?
It's like this understanding of God challenges us to be more inclusive,
Yeah.
accepting of everyone, no matter where they fall on that gender spectrum.
Precisely. And it invites us to celebrate that diversity. It's a reflection of how rich and complex God is.
That's a powerful message, especially in a world that feels so divided. This view of God, it offers a way towards more unity, more understanding.
You're absolutely right. It's a reminder that our differences, instead of pulling us apart, actually make creation more beautiful, more whole.
This deep dive is making me see things differently. Myself, God, the world around me, it's like a whole new way of looking at things is opening up.
That's the power of asking tough questions and digging into these deep truths. It can be uncomfortable, sure, but it leads to a more meaningful experience of faith.
I'm so glad you sent in this question about the sex of God. It's really made us think in new ways.
Me too. It's a conversation that's so important today, especially with all the cultural and societal changes happening.
Okay, so we've unpacked the imagery, explored God as beyond gender, and talked about how it affects our relationships. What else is there as we keep going on this deep dive?
Well, now that we've laid that groundwork, I think it's time to get practical, maybe even a little uncomfortable. How does this understanding of God actually change our lives? How we interact with the world?
Those are great questions. Let's get into it. I feel like this whole conversation, God being beyond gender, it's really made us rethink some basic stuff about faith. It's not just heady theory, is it?
Not at all. It's exciting because it opens up possibilities for a bigger, more inclusive faith for people and whole communities.
I'm curious how so. what does that look like practically?
Well, for one, it can challenge those traditional power structures in religion, hierarchies. If we're saying God's beyond gender, then structures based on gender, they don't really hold up anymore theologically.
So it's not just our image of God that changes, but how we've organized our whole religious lives.
Exactly. This could dismantle systems that exclude people, create space for more diversity, leaders, how we interpret the Bible, even how we express our spirituality.
That's powerful, especially for folks who felt pushed aside by traditional religion.
Absolutely. We can move past those strict gender roles, embrace a wider range of experiences as valuable in our faith communities.
It seems like this could also make us more compassionate, more understanding about sexuality and gender identity. Those are such hot-button issues in religion.
You're right. When we see God's image in all that human diversity, it's hard to justify discrimination, excluding someone just because of their gender identity or who they love.
It's like that understanding of God's all-encompassing nature, it pushes us to be more loving, accepting.
Precisely. We see that divine spark in every person, no matter how they identify, who they love.
This makes me think about interfaith dialogue, too. If we're willing to challenge our own assumptions about gender and God, could that make for better conversations with people from other faiths?
Absolutely. It creates a foundation of understanding, respect. When we recognize the limits of our own language, categories, we're more open to hearing how others experience God, connect with the divine.
It's like realizing God's beyond our limited ideas. That can bridge faiths instead of dividing them.
Exactly. We can focus on the shared stuff. Love, compassion, justice. Those are at the heart of so many religions.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes. This understanding has the power to change things. Not just theology, but making a more just, compassionate, inclusive world.
It's about recognizing we're all connected, our shared responsibility to care for each other, for the planet, and understanding God is free from gender. That can be a huge force for good in the world.
As we talk about society, different faiths, I've been thinking about something more personal. We've said human language is limited when it comes to God. So we're trying to move past those traditional male terms. What do we call God? Is there a right way?
That's a question everyone asks, and there's no easy answer. The Bible itself uses all sorts of names, metaphors for God, shows how rich and complex God is.
True, but like we've said, most of those lean masculine.
Yeah, it's a product of the time, the culture, like we discussed. But the key is, no single word can fully capture who God is. Our language will always fall short.
So does that mean any word's as good as any other?
Not exactly. It's less about finding the perfect word and more about using what feels right to you, but also being aware of how it might affect others.
What do you mean?
Some people are fine with father. It brings comfort, even though they know it's metaphorical. Others prefer creator or source, more gender neutral. Some might use imagery, focusing on qualities of God, like love or wisdom.
So no one right answer.
Exactly. Approach it with humility, be open to different views. What matters is that the language helps you connect with God in a real way.
Makes sense. It's finding what speaks to our own hearts, but also respecting other people's journeys.
Precisely. And it's okay to try different things. Our understanding of God keeps growing, so the words we use might change too.
This has been helpful. I feel like I have a better handle on how to approach this. It's a sensitive topic.
I'm glad. It's an ongoing conversation, one that needs thought, respectful dialogue. There might not be one right answer, but wrestling with these questions that can deepen our faith, make us understand God and ourselves better.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. Changed how I think about God, myself, the world.
I'm so glad. It's been a joy to explore this with you.
Before we wrap up, any last thoughts for our listeners as they keep thinking about God and gender?
Keep exploring. Read, reflect, pray, talk to people with different views. The more we learn and grow, the more we see how vast and mysterious God is.
Great advice. This deep dive has definitely raised a lot of questions for me. I'm excited to keep learning.
It's a journey that can bring us closer to God and to each other. Embrace the mystery. Stay curious. Keep searching.
This has been another episode of The Deep Dive, where we take your questions and, well, deep dive into them. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of God's nature.
It's been a pleasure.
If you're listening and have a topic you'd like us to tackle, send it our way. We love diving into those complex, fascinating questions that shape our world.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, keep growing.
And remember, there's always more to discover.